Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So now it is time for my top 10 players in the NHL. If you've been following the YouTube, been following the Instagram, been following the TikTok, you know that it's player rating season and we have our top 50. I've been counting it down. Feel free to go watch those videos or look at those posts, but we don't have time to recap. We're diving straight into the top 10 superstar franchise talents, the guys that you can win a Stanley Cup with as your best player. I truly believe this. So without further ado, let's dive into it. Let's not waste any time. And at number 10, I have Matthew Tkachuk. Now, I talked about him last video because he was on the best contracts list from The Athletic. Go check out that video. But I'll give the little spiel. Last year, he had 109 points, 40 goals, 69 assists, third in the Hart, only behind Pastrnak and Conor McDavid, of course. And then in the playoffs was also just as good, led the Florida Panthers basically like single-handedly from an offensive standpoint. So many clutch moments to get them to the Stanley Cup final. Offensively, obviously, Bobrovsky played great as well. And then this year, coming off a broken sternum, had a slow start to the season, was shooting like 4%, but in his final 45 games was around 114 pace. So he returned to form, was very good yet again in the playoffs, not quite as good as last year, 22 points in 24 games. But when looking at him, he is just the ideal power forward. The amount of physicality as well as skill that he can bring to the table is the guy that you would want to start your franchise with. He's built for the playoffs. We've obviously seen that the last 2 years. So I got to give my flowers to Matthew Tkachuk. At the end of last year, he was even higher at the end of last year. He was like 7th. Then even after a slow start, I didn't really drop him that much. I put him back down to like 12th or 13th when his stats, like honestly, were like maybe outside of the top 15. I still knew he was an elite player, but I have him still in the top 10 for this end of the season ranking. And I have him at number 10. Number 9. Sidney Crosby, timeless, ageless wonder. When looking at him, he was having a pretty solid first 5/6 of the season. When looking at him in his first 69 games, he had 33 goals, 36 assists, 69 points, but nothing really like remarkable. But then the Penguins just go on this run almost single-handedly because of Sidney Crosby without Jake Gensel. Obviously, they traded him at the deadline. And in his final 13 games, he had 9 goals, 16 assists, and 25 points, proving yet again, while maybe he doesn't still have the offensive ceiling of some of the guys that are ahead of him in terms of a full season, he can still dominate games. He can still take over, and he can still be the best player on the ice and go on these 15-game insane runs. Is he as good as he used to be defensively? Not exactly. But still, Sidney Crosby is still a franchise player. It's unfortunate that he's in Pittsburgh because he might never see another postseason again if he stays in Pittsburgh. But he is still an amazing player, and as a result, he re-enters my top 10. Never fell past like number 12 in any of these lists, but after the way that he finished last season, although I still don't think that he should have got like Hart votes, I thought that was ridiculous for that 13-game stretch. But he reminded me yet again just how good he is. And at number 8, I have Alexander Barkov. Alexander Barkov this season and basically for the last 2 to 3 seasons has been putting up around 90 to 95 point pace, which isn't that remarkable, but it's remarkable when you're also the best defensive center in the NHL. After Patrice Bergeron retired, he is now the guy. He is probably going to be the next Patrice Bergeron. He's probably going to win 4, maybe even 5 Selkies. He already has 2 at like 28 years old. And this season, last year, he was kind of a little bit disappointing in the playoffs, even though they made the Stanley Cup final. Again, it was more so the Matthew Tkachuk show. He was amazing this year in the playoffs, shutting down guys like in the first round, Nikita Kucherov didn't have a single goal. Yes, he had 7 assists. In the second round, David Pastrnak wasn't that effective. Artemi Panarin in the third round, granted, McDavid still had a pretty good finals, but Draisaitl didn't really that much. So when looking at him, he is just locked down, and he still is very good offensively. He still gives you 90 to 95 points. He's no slouch. It's just the defense is definitely the first thing that gets mentioned with Alexander Barkov, and just overall such a high IQ guy. So I got to have him at number 8. I got to respect him after such an impressive playoff run. At number 7, I have David Pastrnak. Now, he is the guy that can carry your team offensively. He can run an entire offense. He can power an entire offense. Last year, 62 goals, 51 assists, 113 points. The next closest on his team was Brad Marchand at 21 goals, 46 assists, 67 points. He led his team in points by 46 last year. And what does he do this year? Not as productive goal scoring wise, but still has 47 goals, and he has 63 assists for 110 points. Meanwhile, Brad Marchand was yet again the second leading scorer on the Bruins, but he only had 29 goals, 38 assists for 67 points. So he only led the team in points by 43 this season. He has come a long way, especially as a playmaker. He was always a fantastic sniper, but he's really came along as a playmaker. Yes, does he do some dumb turnovers, maybe a little bit lackadaisical on the defensive end? At times, yes, but when looking at David Pastrnak, he is a one-man offense and has proven that the last 2 years, and now his contract is honestly looking like one of the better contracts in the NHL. Next up at number 6, it starts to get a little bit controversial, but I'm going to go with Cale Makar at number 6. Yes, I have Cale Makar at number 6. In prior years, I had him number 2, I had him number 3, and he was still highly productive offensively. He missed a couple games, but he would have breezed into the mid-90s, maybe even ended up winning the Norris. I don't think that he even should have been nominated, if I'm being honest, but if he played 82 games, the voters might have voted for him. But when looking at Cale Makar, he did take a bit of a step back defensively, and honestly offensively at even strength, especially when he was away from Nathan McKinnon. You look at the underlying numbers with that on the ice, Nathan McKinnon without. It was a little bit of a down year for Cale Makar. And again, a down year is still top 10 player probably in the NHL, but this season was the first kind of, he's not clearly the best defenseman on a per game basis in the NHL. Last year, 66 points, 60 games, was very good defensively, would have won the Norris if he played 82 games. The year prior, 2022, he won it. 2021, he missed a couple games, so Adam Fox ended up winning it. But this was the first year where like Quinn Hughes, obviously better. I'd say Roman Josi had a better season. On a per-game basis, Adam Fox definitely had a better season. So I'm not ready to drop him. Because again, he was also awesome in the playoffs. Like, he looked much better in the playoffs. But this was a little bit of a down year from Cale Makar. So I'm going to put him at number 6. I like the guys that I have in the top 5 just a little bit more. I still think that he's the best defenseman in the NHL. He's still arguably like one of the greatest offensive defensemen ever. Probably the best pure offensive defenseman when you compare to eras. It's probably Bobby Orr. But like in terms of actual talent, it's Cale Makar. But I have him at number 6. And number 5, Nikita Kucherov. Nikita Kucherov at number 5, a guy that similarly to a David Pastrnak led his offense. Now, granted, he did have some more elite players like a Steven Stamkos, like Braden Point. I don't know why I blanked on that. Victor Hedman's still great offensively. Brandon Hagel, but still 44 goals, 100 assists, 144 points in 82 games. Basically single-handedly led them to the best power play in the NHL. 28.6%. Carried Steven Stamkos to a 40-goal season. Steven Stamkos had like 20 of his 40 goals on the power play. And when looking at him, just an amazing playmaker, amazing passer. Not even like, you don't talk about his goal-scoring threat, but again, he had 44 goals this season. It's just when you have a season where you get 100 assists and you're only the 5th guy in NHL history to do that, you're going to focus on that. He is just such a special offensive talent that I think that a 5th place spot is well warranted. Didn't have the best playoffs. Yes, he had 7 points, but it was only 7 assists. And he doesn't play a ton of defense, so I can't really put him that high. And he is a winger, so I think number 5 is a fair spot for Nikita Kucherov. I can see you having him number 4. I can see you even having him number 3. Not quite a top 2 guy, but I don't think that's that controversial. Next up, Austin Matthews almost had 70 goals this season. Obviously, just got shy. 69 goals, 38 assists for 107 points in 81 games. Reestablished himself yet again as the no doubt best goal scorer in the entire NHL. I don't know why people for a second thought that it wasn't him. I said before the season, he's going to lead the league in goal scoring. His worst season was last year, or worst season like of him actually in his prime. He had 40 goals in 70 or 75 games, and everybody's like, he's washed up. Maybe he's just not that good. No, he comes out. He scores 69 goals. And yet again, it's not just the goal scoring, it's also the defense. He is becoming a Selke level guy. So the fact that you can get near 65, 70 goals on top of him being such a special defensive talent, that deserves a top 4 spot. The playoff performances, at the end of the day, it wasn't good enough this year, even though he was dealing with some injuries. Outside of game 2, he didn't really show up that much in a big way. And in prior years, he hasn't been the best playoff guys. If you're looking at regular season, I'd probably go with 3rd for Austin Matthews, ahead of the guy that you could probably assume that I have at 3rd. But in terms of the overall package, both regular season and playoffs, I got to put him at number 4 as of right now, which means that number 3, I got Leon Draisaitl. I have Leon Draisaitl here. Had a bit of a down offensive year after 128 points, by far leading the NHL, or by far in second place of the NHL in points. He only had 41 goals, 65 assists, 106 points. And this year, the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, I feel like people are already forgetting it because they've been talking so much about McDavid, but he was the clear MVP Conn Smythe favorite in the first 2 rounds when he had 8 goals, 16 assists for 24 points in 24 games. I think McDavid only had like 2 goals and 18 assists. Like, Leon Draisaitl was running the show early on in the playoffs. for the Edmonton Oilers. And just in prior years, he had been just as good as McDavid in the playoffs. So when looking at him, the fact that he does bring it in the playoffs, I would put him over in Austin Matthews. If you told me in a playoff game, game 7, game 6, who I trust, I would go with Leon Draisaitl. Yes, he's maybe not as good defensively, but he still is such a talent. And yes, he plays with Conor McDavid on the power play, but on that second line, he had jack shit really to work with this season. It was like Evander Kane and Warren Fogle and God knows who else. So although he does benefit from playing on the power play, Edmonton this year, he's actually going to have some solid wingers with like Arvidsson or Jeff Skinner. But in prior years, he did not have that much talent on that second line and still produces at such a high rate. And he's the go-to guy in the power play for a reason, because he is such an extremely talented goal scorer. So I have Leon Draisaitl at number 3. I understand if you have Matthews there, that's definitely interchangeable. But at number 2, Nathan McKinnon. Pretty obviously at number 2 after the season that he just had. 51 goals, 89 assists for 140 points. Nathan McKinnon, 51 goals. God damn, he is just such an explosive offensive player. Has, outside of McDavid, arguably like the most shot out of a cannon kind of effect ability. I don't know if that's exactly a term, but when looking at him, just such a dynamic offensive player, and honestly was solid defensively this year. In prior years, he was pretty below average defensively, but he very much held his own defensively. So when looking at just how productive he has been the last 2 seasons, last year he had in 70 or 71 games, he had 110 points. He was like tied with Draisaitl in terms of points per game for the second most. So when looking at it, he really just put it together this season and had the best regular season of his career. And for the most part, every single postseason, he did go dry a couple of games against Dallas, but his postseason numbers are also extremely strong. I believe he's like 1.3, 1.4 points per game. So Nathan McKinnon at this point is pretty easily my number 2 player in the NHL. I don't think after the season that we just saw, that can be disputed that much, if I'm going to be honest. And at number 1, still Conor McDavid, down year in the regular season, 32 goals, 100 assists, similar to Kucherov, one of 5 players to ever accomplish that feat now. And yeah, he is amazing. He's the best, most talented player of all time. Don't think I'm shocking anybody with that. Last year, 153 points. This year, what did it finish? What did it end up being? The 3rd most points in a single playoff run, on top of winning the Conn Smythe as a losing player, which I'm sure that he hated to do, but that is still an extremely impressive thing. He dragged them in against the Dallas Stars in honestly 2-7 games. So when looking at Connor McDavid, he's obviously number 1. But here's the full top 10. I'll flash it right now. I'll recap it. It goes Tkachuk, Crosby, Barkov, Pastrnak, Makar, Kucherov, Matthews, Draisaitl, and then McKinnon and McDavid. Let me know in the comments, what do you think? Who would you move up? Who would you move down? Who from outside of the top 10 would you put in? And I'll be seeing the next one.